Encourage you to open your Bibles, please, to Ezekiel, the 11th chapter, where we saw last week that 11th chapter ends with the glory of Jehovah departing from Jerusalem. You've got to remember that Ezekiel is speaking to the people in a Babylonian captivity, and we're looking at times around 591 BC. When does Jerusalem fall to Nebuchadnezzar, where the temple is burnt? What year is that? 586. That'll be in your mind. 536, they rebuild the temple, and they go back to rebuild the temple. But 586, 606, when Daniel went off, and people are in captivity over there in Babylon. But what we see here is Ezekiel is taken in a vision, and he's taken to what city? Jerusalem. And he's going to be in that vision seeing how God looks upon their idolatry. We talked about that in chapter 10. And in chapter 11 we end up seeing the glory of Jehovah going from the temple to the east gate to the mountain in the east. You know, you got Mount Olives that direction. And the glory of God is leaving, and he gets back in the vision. He's back in where he is at Chaldea. Not that he left literally, he may have, but in a vision, he went there. And now he's back in a vision. And so we open up this next section, lesson 4, where we're looking at and we got this is online, and also if you need one tonight, we kind of took care of that. But if you'll just listen and follow your Bible, we'll answer the questions. You'll see the questions when I ask them. You can find an answer for them. But you ought to have that in front of you. We pass those out, and they'll be for you. But this will take us through chapters 12 through 16. In this section, there's more signs. And one of the things we need to see is that Ezekiel, even in the text, you will be a sign. Ezekiel will be a sign. And we think about Jonah. Well, what the sign of Jonah is how Jesus was going to be resurrected. How was Jonah a sign? He literally was a sign. He was left for dead, and the big fish vomited him up, and when he came into the shores of Nineveh, they thought that man was dead. Now he's alive. That's the sign. Even the prophet himself becomes a sign, so they're involved in acting out the things that are going to happen in the future. So there's signs, there's parables, there's things given of we might look at vines, and we might look at different things, olive trees, and of different types of vegetation or types of animals. And we're looking at what's the spiritual story behind that. And they're usually defined. And sometimes we're looking in this section of discourses where he begins to speak to the people. So if you have your Bibles open to Ezekiel, the 12th chapter, we'll get into that. When we ask the first question, this takes the first 16 verses. All this comes together in one question. What 3 facts in the sign of Ezekiel, he's a sign, were literally manifested in the exile of Zedekiah. Now let's fast forward, 591 BC. You remember in the days of Jeremiah, or even in Ezekiel's day, rather, there was Hananiah, for example, was setting forth the fact that there was going to be you're going to be on 2 years in captivity. Jeconiah's coming back in 2 years. And that wasn't going to happen. Ezekiel is over here Jeremiah goes to Babylon captivity and says, you can build houses because you're going to be here 70 years. And we saw in chapter 11 here where the idea is that we're here, we don't need God. God has deserted us, and we're here serving our idols, and whatever happens, happens. Whatever happens, happens. We're flesh in a cauldron. Whatever happens, happens. And that could be a protection idea, but it could be one, as they're applying it, that we are here, and as we'll see in these next few chapters, they are there, and they don't need to listen to a prophet speak about judgment is coming. They are saying, well, it'd be way afar off, as we'll see in this section. But they're following their idols. That's their strength. Nations are their strength. And they're going to find out Nebuchadnezzar is coming. And what we're looking at 591, just 5 years from now, God's prophecies are coming true. And they don't believe them. So here is a sign that it was fulfilled in Zedekiah. And we read in 2 Kings 25. We'll also read in Jeremiah where he gives a little more details to Zedekiah. But the Chaldeans sieged Jerusalem in the 9th year, 2 years of just holding them in where they cannot get any food in. There's famine, and there's disease that comes with that. Just like Jeremiah prophesied, and Ezekiel is saying it's coming, and we're just 5 years away from it, or 5 years away from that event taking place. So here he begins to speak and using Ezekiel as one who can literally set forth this is what's going to happen. So in these verses, I'm going to read the first 6 verses, and then the rest of it he's applying. The word of Jehovah also came to me, saying, Son of man, thou dwellest in the midst of the rebellious house, that have eyes to see and see not, have ears to hear and hear not, for they are a rebellious house. They got eyes, they could see, they could understand, they could hear the prophets of God, but they're not going to listen to them. Therefore, Son of man, prepare thee stuff. I'm reading from the American Standard. Prepare thee stuff for removing, and remove by day in their sight, and thou shalt remove them from the place to another place in their sight. It may be they will consider, though they are a rebellious house. Why are you moving your stuff away? And of course, we see that idea of daytime, they would see that. And then he said, Thou shalt bring forth thy stuff by day in their sight, as stuff for removing. And he says, And thou shalt go forth thyself at even. So here we come to the second 12 hours of the day, eventime, sunset into the night. Thou shalt, at even in their sight, is when men go forth into exile. If they're going to go into exile, they will exile out. And that will be how they're leaving. Dig thou through the wall in their sight, and carry out thereby. So dig out the wall, carry thereby. In their sight shalt thou bear it upon thy shoulder, carry it forth in the dark, and thou shalt cover thy face, that thou see not the land. For I have set thee I've set thee, Ezekiel, I've set you for a sign unto the house of Israel. So what we're observing there is the fact that this is the sign that he's going to be. He's carrying out some actions. What 3 facts in his work do you see that was fulfilled literally in Zedekiah? Did he escape through the breach of a wall? Yeah, I hope you've read I hope you read 2 Kings 20. Got into it and realized here's a sign. I wonder what does that mean? Well, Zedekiah fulfilled them. That's when Babylon goes down. That's when the temple is destroyed. And what we're observing here, I don't read where he used his hands and dug a hole in the wall. What I read from Jeremiah is that when he saw that Nebuchadnezzar and all of his ruling parties, princes, were sitting in the middle gate, he went out to King's Gate. He went out to King's Garden. And that's when they got afraid. The army goes out that day. They were escaping because the walls had been besieged. There's a breach in the walls, and Zedekiah is leaving. Secondly, he left at nighttime. That's kind of when you want to go. Nobody can see you. What was his stuff that he's preparing? Jeremiah would prophesy to the people of Egypt that indeed prepare your preparations for leaving. Bring forth the preparation, maybe food, things that they need. Bring them forth, because Egyptians, you're going into exile. And this is what's happening to God's people. So he leaves at night through a breach in the wall, and Ezekiel covered his face. Why? Because Zedekiah's eyes will be put out, literally. He won't see the land. That's what he said. He won't see the land. That would happen a little later in Riblah, when they go in to try to escape and go into the deserted places. They find him near Jericho, Jeremiah writes, and take him to Riblah, where they put out his eyes after he saw his sons all put to death, executed. And he didn't see the land. He'd go into captivity, and he would never see the land. He would die in that land. So here are things. You talk about a prophecy. It wasn't, well, it just generally happens and all that. It was specified that I want you, Ezekiel, I want you to dig the hole, because there's not a breach in the walls. You're not going to put a hole in the walls, and that's all right, but you dig a hole, and you dig where you can get out. And he did this. Verse 7, I did as I was commanded. And I brought forth my stuff by day, as stuff for removing, and in the evening I digged through the wall with my hand. I brought it forth in the dark, and I bare it on my shoulder in their sight. And this is what God was hoping. They said, what are you doing? You know, when people are no longer curious about the Bible, they're bored with it, it's kind of hard to talk to them. And he said, did you hear anybody say, what are you doing? I would think, what's happening here? In the morning came the word of Jehovah unto me, saying, Son of man, hath not the house of Israel, the rebellious house, said unto thee, what doest thou? Say thou unto them, thus saith the Lord Jehovah, this burden cometh concerning the prince in Jerusalem. Who's the prince in Jerusalem? Zedekiah, at the time when he has to leave. And all the house of Israel, among whom they are, say, I am your sign. Look at what I'm doing. I am the sign. Just like Jonah is the sign. He's dead. He thought he was dead. He's alive. And so shall it be done unto them. They shall go into exile, into captivity. And the prince that is among you shall bear upon his shoulder in the dark, and shall go forth, and they shall dig through all of the things that are involved there, and they will dig through there, and they'll be taken as a snare, as we see in verse 13. To Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans, yet shall he not see it, though he shall die there. So the point is, he will die there, and that will be where Zedekiah would literally die. He would never see anything again. And so he says in verse 14, I will scatter toward every wind all them around about him to help him. So all of the people you're relying upon are not going to help you. And they shall know that I am Jehovah when I shall disperse them from among the nations and scatter them through the countries. But I'm going to leave a few men of them from the sword, from the famine, and from the pestilence. Excuse me, I'll get there. Thank you. That they may declare all their abominations among the nations. Whether they come, they shall see and know that I am Jehovah. 2 times he stresses, I am Jehovah. How do we know Jehovah sometimes? Through judgment. We only know Jehovah through the gospel. That would be good. But we know Jehovah through his judgments as well. That's all through the Bible. And sometimes that's the side that people don't want to see. When hell is a place where people are going to go, they're going to know Jehovah. He and his angels would cast them into those eternal fires. And that's where it is going to be. Okay, any questions on question number 1 about what literally was manifested? What 3 facts took place? Yeah, anything to add to that? All right. Let's look at question number 2. Okay. Question number 2. Why would the inhabitants of Jerusalem and Israel eat and drink with trembling? So let's take our Bibles. I like to do that and go through the text and see, well, why did you get these? Where you get these questions? Well, what is Ezekiel now starting to do on this occasion? I want you to eat bread. How? Quaking, trembling. And I want you to drink water with trembling. So I want you to eat bread with quaking. And then you got trembling with drinking the water with fearfulness. and saying to the people of the land, thus saith the Lord Jehovah concerning the inhabitants of Jerusalem and the land of Israel. Okay. I'm sorry, Norris. You got it up here. Let me just keep going. They shall eat their bread with fearfulness and drink their water in dismay, and her land shall be what? There you go, thanks. I hate to put all of them up there. Question number 2 we're on. Will you stay with me on question number 2? Why would the inhabitants of Jerusalem and Israel eat and drink with trembling? Why would that happen? And why would it be bread and wine? What they drink and what they eat. Why would it be that eat their bread with fearfulness and drink their water? Because the land will become desolate. That's why. You're not going to have any grain. It's the only thing you've got inside the city of Jerusalem, and there's the famine that's taking place. There'll be the water supply is going to be affected. You'll drink your water, and you'll eat your bread with trembling. Because why? Because indeed the land is going to be left unto you desolate. Notice in verse 19. They shall eat their bread with fearfulness and drink their water in dismay, and her land may be desolate and despoiled of all that is therein because of the violence of all them that dwelt therein. Remember, here's people leaving God, and they were doing violence to innocent people. We've seen that they're in the streets, as we saw in chapter 11. You think you are flesh in a cauldron. You've destroyed the people in Jerusalem. A lot of the innocents have been put to death. They are the flesh in the cauldron, but I'm taking you out. You're not going to stay in Jerusalem to be protected by the fire. Or as in a cauldron. And either way you want to look at it as a positive or a negative. Well, we're here to cook our own juices, or no, we're here to be protected from the fire because we're in a pot. We talked about that. But the point is, I'm going to take you out and you'll be at another place. This Jerusalem is not going to be your cauldron. And that's kind of what they were saying. So their land would be desolate, but what does he get Ezekiel to be doing? He's got Ezekiel to be involved in setting forth the fact that you eat it and you drink it with trembling, so they'll get the idea of that. And all the cities and the cities that are inhabited shall be laid waste, and the land shall be a desolation. And again, you shall know what? You shall know that I'm Jehovah. That just keeps coming. All right, question number 3. Because God had not yet executed Ezekiel's prophecy, what were 2 responses among the people? What were 2 responses among the people? You got to work that out. It's not just popping up, but it's absorbing verses 17 following, and picking up with verse 21. I've got it on. Okay, I'll get it back when I'm ready. Thank you. I don't want you to think you did anything wrong. So, what are we observing here, beginning with verse 21? So let's talk about a proverb that was going around among the people. The word Jehovah came to me, saying, Son of man, what is this proverb that ye have in the land of Israel, saying, number 1, this might be it. The days are prolonged, and every vision fails or faileth. The days are prolonged, and every vision faileth. What are we realizing? Well, God's judgment hadn't come yet. Jerusalem's still not desolate. Jerusalem cities were not besieged. 5 years away maybe. They didn't know that. But what were the responses among the people? How would you take that and you think about it, put it in your own words. What is the mentality, how to respond to that they're doing? David? Hadn't happened yet, so therefore, they failed. That's right. You got it. Because it hasn't happened yet. Where's the promise of his coming? What is 2 Peter 3? Wasn't that it? The mockers say, things have continued on as before. Where's the promise of his coming? Well, God said he'd come. No, where's the promise? It hasn't happened yet. He prolongeth his days, therefore, false reasoning, but that's the way they reason, therefore the vision fails. Because they put God in a box, and yet here they're going to see exactly that indeed they will be exactly 70 years in captivity, and not 2 years right when they first went in. But they're going to learn that. So that's one of the things. Idea of you haven't fulfilled it yet, and therefore the vision fails because it's prolonged. It's prolonged. Now, what is another one that you see here in this text that says it'll be a second reason? Let's just drop down again, verse 25. I am Jehovah, I will speak, the word that I will speak shall be performed. I'm still going to do it. Let's drop to verse 26. Again, the word of Jehovah came to me, saying, Son of man, behold, they of the house of Israel, they say something. This must be number 2. The vision that he seeth is for many days to come, and he prophesies of times that are far off. Is that a different response? Then it ain't going to happen? But what is that one? Well, it hadn't happened yet. We're not saying it won't happen. But it's going to be a long time from now, so don't worry about it. It ends up kind of saying, forget about the vision. It's failed, and it's just for a long time to take place. And so they don't have to worry about it. So this adds to the mentality of the people, how they had about the city. We talk about the cauldron, and we're flesh in a cauldron. And it's the idea that indeed they're now in control of their land. And therefore the prophecies that say we're going to be destroyed hasn't happened yet. And therefore some were saying it's not going to happen. No, it's for many days hence. We've got strength, we've got numbers, we've got people, and yeah, we're the flesh in a cauldron, but we'll just deal with what we have and put our trust in idols, put our trust in nations, and it's from many days hence that it would take place. Both of those are wrong, and God's not governed by days, though he gets exactly when he wants things to be done 70 years, it'll be 70 years. But as far as it's coming, what do we know from 2 Peter 3? God is long-suffering, not willing that any should perish, but he's not slack concerning his singular promise, I'm coming again. Consider the fact that he hasn't come yet as salvation for you. What's Ezekiel been doing to help them to see judgment is coming upon you? Don't they ask you why? He's trying to get them to see that they need to be trembling because their land's going to be desolate. Don't you know why? And it's because the idolatrous works of the people, as we'll see in chapter 13, the false prophets, the idea of granting, saying, we got peace, we got this thing under control. And I think that's the mentality there, though they've had people go off. They think he'll come back soon in 2 years. This is just a hiccup. But they're leaving God out, so they don't want to listen to prophecy. And they're willing to go this on their own with the help that they put in as far as other nations and so forth trying to help them. But Nebuchadnezzar will overcome all of them. So I think those are the two responses. They're not the same, but they're both disregarding God. He's not governed by time, and he doesn't lie. He will fulfill his promise. He said, I will perform it. Verse 25, I am Jehovah, I will speak, and the words that I shall speak shall be performed. It shall no more be deferred. It wasn't that it wasn't ever going to happen. It's not going to be deferred any longer. For in your days, O rebellious house, will I speak the word and will perform it, saith the Lord Jehovah. In your days. You don't know exactly when that will be. We've seen Hananiah live for 2 months after prophet Jeremiah said, you'll be dead before the year's out. He got 2 months after that. We've seen Pedaliah die when they were talking about the cauldron and that sort of thing, and not listening and turning their backs upon God's temple to worship the sun and so forth. He died. And God brings his justice and brings his judgment upon them. And he said, I'm not going to defer it. It's going to take place. And so the idea of saying many days to come, verse 27, he prophesied of the times that are far off. Therefore saying to them, thus saith the Lord, there shall none of my words be deferred any more, but the word which I shall speak shall be performed, saith the Lord Jehovah. And what we see back history, they got 5 years. And it happened. And he's going to save some. Remember, we saw the mark that's going to be placed upon them. It's kind of said, these are my people. You're not going to destroy them. They'll go into captivity. But there would be a remnant coming. And as Ezekiel cried when Pedaliah died, is there not going to be a remnant? You're going to destroy everybody? He said, no, there'll be a remnant. But here is the rebellious house in action. And that becomes very important to their demise. All right. Any thoughts upon that? On that particular question? All right, let's fill in the blank. Question number 4. False prophets follow their blank and have blank nothing. What would be the answer to that? And where did you find it? Let's go into chapter 13. Notice how he introduces this. The word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the prophets. Now we're going after the teachers. Prophesy against the prophets of Israel that prophesy, and say thou unto them that prophesy out of their own heart, hear ye the word of Jehovah. Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, woe unto the foolish prophets, they follow their own spirit. When you put that in the blank, they follow their own spirit and have seen their vision. They get visions. Ezekiel got a vision, prophesied what that was like. He told what the prophecy was. It was a seer. The prophet was also a seer. But they have seen nothing but what comes from their own spirit. And so when he says in verse 2, they prophesy of their own heart. I have a spirit, but it's their own heart telling them what they would like to say. And really they haven't seen a vision from the Lord. So we're being introduced into a section of what we would call, these were the false prophets. You'll never see God call them that. Never. Our Bible has false prophets condemned. I see in the New Testament in 2 Peter, where while there were false prophets, there'll be false teachers among you. So I know they're here. And what God does, he paints their picture. We get caught up in semantics. You can't call that man a false teacher. He's got a sincere heart. You can't call him, you're attacking him. But what God attacks is what they do. They're false because what? They speak lies. And while the term false prophet, I haven't found it in the text. But notice how he paints their picture. When he says, woe to the foolish prophets that follow their own spirit and see nothing. Verse 4, Israel, thy prophets have been like foxes in the waste places. I want to come back to that. Ye have not gone up unto the gaps, neither built the wall for the house of Israel. That's what we want to explore in this question. To stand the battle of the day of Jehovah. They have seen falsehood and lying divination. They have seen falsehood and lying divination that say, Jehovah said. But Jehovah hath not sent them. And they have made men to hope that the word would be confirmed. Have you not seen a false vision? And have you not spoken a lying divination? And that you say, Jehovah saith, albeit I have not spoken. So how does God define what we say? Well, there's the false prophet. And that's what they put up. False prophets condemned. That's on top of my inspired scriptures. That's what man has done, is he's divided things into chapters, and we've got a coherent Bible to follow. It's that while he doesn't call them that, he wants to help us understand what's important is that what they're saying is a lie. And Peter, by inspiration, he said, well, there arose false prophets. He didn't mind calling them that, but I never find God doing that in the Old Testament. There arose false prophets among the people, as among you also there should be false teachers. Well, here's false prophets arising among the people. And how do I know they're a false prophet? Do they contradict? It's not time to build your houses. It hasn't happened yet, so it won't happen. And prolong your days, where are they getting at? That's not coming from God. Ezekiel is being sent to hit at that. We know from the scriptures that indeed, if a prophet prophesies something and it doesn't come true, we know that he's prophesied falsely. That's not a true prophet. And therefore he'd be a false prophet. But he digs down also the next step, wonder if it does come true, and he said, you go worship idols. Well, it came true. He must be a true prophet, not when you contradict what God's revealed. Not when you contradict what God's revealed. And you're never to worship any idols. So sometimes we go to one passage and we forget the other one. But there again, what God's revealed, it's there clear. I don't worship any idols. But boy, what we said, we got lucky. It came true. We must be a true prophet. But if someone is speaking in the name of the Lord and prophesies something and it does not come, then they would know that that person has not spoken from God. And that's what Ezekiel is addressing here, that they are seeing things. They're saying, for example, there's peace when really there's not peace. There's coming judgment coming upon the people. But I think that's good in our time, because when the discussion, can you have fellowship with people who teach error on marriage, divorce, remarriage? You have some men that teach error on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. People would acknowledge that, but they say, no, they're not a false teacher. And they go to 2 Peter 3 and 2 Peter 2, and they'll go there and realize that one who speaks about the false teachers, they're the ones that they have an insincere heart. These people that are false teachers, they're wanting to satisfy themselves. They have character flaws. And therefore this man didn't have a character flaw because he's a good guy and he's been respected as a respected preacher. So I wouldn't call him that, but would you have fellowship with him? And there were a lot of people who said, yeah, they could, if he doesn't teach on the subject, if that sort of thing. So that caused division among people. That seems to have gone away with people who have died and so forth, but that principle is still here. Once somebody is popular to you, and are you going to use that argument? Well, I can't call him a false teacher, and you are bad to do that. And it caused division among people who may have believed the same thing. And all I had to do was, well, can you have fellowship with him? Would you have him come in to preach? And say, no. But don't you dare call him a false teacher. If they teach false doctrine, God puts them in a category of teaching falsely. That's a false teacher. I don't mean to be labeling somebody and being mean and being unjust and being unchristlike. It's just looking at their teachings, and you better have a reason for saying that. We're seeing what here, God never gave them that vision. He's not from me. David? That's right.
That's something that people who are truly what I think you could call false teachers, they do not do.
Well, I studied with men before I would call them false teachers, and saw that in fact, they said, we don't need to study anymore. I'm going to believe what I believe. I wouldn't have called someone if I was still trying to reach them. But Stephen, would you call him a false teacher if he kept teaching what he taught? Could you call him that? After he rejected the Anasins, the Priscilla, Aquila? See, we don't have that because you say he changed, didn't he? He changed. We understand. My saying is, if you hadn't, after he had denied, here's the opportunity to teach, and we don't want that anymore, after that, could you have classified him as that? And a lot of people say, no, you can never say that because he never called him a false teacher, even though he taught something that was in error. And I'm just trying to say God never called anybody in the Old Testament false teachers, but he said they're false. And that's what I want to bring about. It's called a semantic thing with that, but God, he addressed the problem. That's what they're teaching. He may never have said false prophets, but they spoke lies. They see things that didn't come from him. They contradict teaching, and he puts them in this category that realize that that's what I mean by a false teacher. If they're ignorant and they don't want to accept the truth, I can't force them, but I can know who they are, and I can warn people about them, and that's all we can do, and go from there. But I just think that question needs to be done today. Do not say the words false prophet. You can't ever say those terms. Well, God never said them in the Old Testament, but Peter said they were there. Where are they? He said it by inspiration. So I don't think it's wrong to do that. But as brought out by David, we don't want to do it. And you have one who is trying to learn better. And that's what we need to do. If they're trying to learn and want to study, there'll be lines where we have long suffering before we draw lines and say, no, I'll expose that man for his false teaching. And 2 John 9, if a man doesn't bring the teaching, you're not to have fellowship with that person. It's not that, well, he's never going to preach the subject as he needs to. He's not going to address that subject because he doesn't believe the truth about that. You're not to have fellowship with him. So they're going to have to know who they are. And a lot of times false teachers come in the cloaks of wolves and looking like sheep, and you've got to look at their teaching. And that's why all the time you see, that's the quote, that's what the man said when people were trying to reach the hearts of people on the idea of fellowship. But that was the problem. You never could use the terms, and so you were condemned if you used it. I wanted to see how God looked at that. Yes. Okay. Any comments? Other comments on that, David? You spoke. Anybody else want to speak about that? All right. Question 5. Well, you'll take that home and deal with that. Explain how the false prophets were like plasters daubing a wall with untempered mortar should be. When he said they were foxes, we just got to go past that one, and I want to talk about that next time. What do you mean by foxes in the land, and also the idea of untempered mortar? That was their teaching. He's describing their teaching, and we're going to see how that does, Lord willing, next time. Any last comments I have? Okay, thank you.